action tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, John Gordon.
Oh, wow.
And before John speaks, I wanted to just give him this. It's a hard hat, and it's Teen Challenge hard hat.
That's awesome.
And so we want you to, every time you look at this, to think about us.
Thank you so much. I love it. I will. Thank you. Should I wear it? No. No, I'll wear it afterwards.
You want to wear it now?
No, I'll wear it afterwards. How y'all doing? I feel like I'm the perfect speaker to speak here tonight because I grew up in New York, Long Island. Long Island guys over there. But I also now live in Florida, so I cover the entire region. And I'm really honored, and it's just so special to be here because when I was 35 years old, Jesus changed my life. I was baptized in 2006, and that changed everything. A change of heart changes everything. See, a few years before that, my wife came up to me and she said, "You're miserable, you're negative, and I hate living with you. And if you don't change, we're over." I had to change. I wanted to stay married. So I agreed to change, and that began this journey of, God, why am I here? God, what am I born to do? What is my purpose? Why am I so miserable? Why am I so negative? And I wasn't a drinker. I did not have an addiction, but I definitely was what you would call a dry drunk. I definitely was someone who had a lot of emotional issues that had not been dealt with. I just hadn't done anything with those issues, but I had a lot of issues. And in those times of crying out, God came to me. First in just surrender, and then in a sermon by Erwin McManus. And Erwin talked about why I follow Jesus. And for the first time, Jesus spoke to me. For the first time, Jesus came to life for me through Erwin's words. And I remember I was driving down to Orlando. I had started to speak a little bit, but not a lot. And I'm driving down for an engagement. And on my way here, I'm looking to the left, and I heard, "Look." And I turned to the right, and there was a sign that says, "Jesus is the answer." You see, I had prayed shortly before that. I said, God, if there is something in this Jesus, show me the sign. Well, he showed me a real sign that Jesus is the answer. And I know that to be true. We know that to be true, don't we? Jesus is the answer. He's the only one who changes us from the inside out, where everything changes. And so I remember giving my life to Jesus, and after that, around the same time, I started to write. I started to write these books that God started to give me. He would give me the vision and the ideas. People ask me all the time. I've written 18 books in the past 13 years now, and they ask me all the time if I have a ghostwriter. I must not look smart enough to write a book. But I tell them, no, I don't have a ghostwriter, but I have a holy ghostwriter. And God writes the books through me. He inspires me. And so since that time, he's been giving me these ideas to these books that I've written. And I wrote a book called The Energy Bus. And that book really changed my life because people actually started to read that book. And as they started to read it, they started to use it with their teams. And that book then led me to write a book called The Power of Positive Leadership. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. That and You Win in the Locker Room. I'm going to combine the two. And the power of positive leadership is everything, and yet I think it's so ironic that I speak about this because I'm not naturally positive. I grew up in Long Island, New York. A Jewish Italian family, a lot of food, a lot of guilt. A lot of wine, a lot of whining. My dad was a New York City police officer, undercover narcotics. He was shot a few times. My dad was not very positive. He was a very loving man, very loving, but just the most negative guy on the planet. You'd get up in the morning, you'd say, "Hey, good morning, Dad." He'd say, "What's so good about it?" My dad was Al Bundy before Al Bundy was Al Bundy. I just realized some of you have no idea who Al Bundy is. So growing up in that family, it made me want to, be a more positive person because I really struggled with negativity. And then my wife's ultimatum changed everything. And then giving my life to Jesus changed everything. And then out of that, I then wrote this book called The Energy Bus. And I remember, finally getting this book to come out, and it was coming out. I was so excited. And I asked a friend, "What should I do?" And he said, "Pray." So I prayed for it to be a bestseller, and it came out. It was a bestseller in Korea. I learned you have to be specific with your prayers. It was like this huge hit in South Korea, not North Korea, but it was this huge hit in South Korea. But not one bookstore in the United States would carry this book. So I decided to go on a 28-city tour. See, God was calling me to go out there. Sometimes we're waiting on God, but God is waiting on us. And so he was like, you got to go and share this message. And so I went from city to city sharing the message because my mission was to encourage and inspire as many people as possible, one person at a time. It all starts with a vision. A positive leader has a vision for the road ahead. What do you want to create with your life? Where do you want to go? It doesn't matter where you were. What do we want to create right now? It doesn't matter what your past was like. What do we want to create in the future? Show that vision for the road ahead, God. What is it you want me to do? Where do you want me to be? Have me follow your path and your plan, because I know that your plan is greater than my plan. I know that your thoughts are greater than my thoughts, God. I know that your vision for my life is greater than my vision. So what is it you want from me? And I had those moments with God. I had those moments where I was crying out, where I was broken, still am, but really broken. And just open to, what do you want me to do? And God said, go. See, God doesn't always give us a roadmap. He often gives us a North Star and says, start walking. He doesn't give us a perfect set of plans. He gives us each other on the journey to give us strength towards this journey. And he was telling me to go. And so I went from city to city sharing the message in the book. We had 5 people in one city. We had 10 people in another. We had 20 people in another. The most people we had were 100 people in Des Moines, Iowa. They thought Jeff Gordon was coming. That's why they showed up. That's not a joke. That's a true story. I remember I got home from this tour, and I was exhausted. I had given everything I had. I was like, God, I'm doing your work, and it wasn't very successful. I walked in the door. I collapsed. My wife was there. I had been away for a while. She was so supportive. You know you're with the right person when they give you strength, and she had given me strength. And I remember just thinking, I don't know what the future holds, but I know who holds my future. And I was trusting God in that moment that all I had to do was work towards the vision every day, to continue to see it. Because if you can see it, you can create it. If you have a vision, you also have the power to make it happen. God gives us both at the same time. He gives us the vision and the power at the same time. He wouldn't give you a vision if it wasn't meant to happen. He gives you the vision and the power. Now, sometimes it means not yet. We have this vision, but sometimes we have to go through the process to become the people that God wants us to become, to realize the vision. But he gives us the vision for the road ahead. And that's what he was doing for me. See, I wasn't really the kind of person yet that God could totally use at that point. The tour started to break me down. It was molding me and shaping me. It was causing me to serve him and to do his work. But I still wasn't quite there. And then along the journey, along the way, he gradually started to use me more and more to reach more people. That vision, though, is what kept me alive. Marathon runners do not quit the marathon in the first mile because they're just getting started. And marathon runners do not quit in the last mile. Even though you've been running the longest, you've been running the farthest, it's when you should give up because you should be the most tired. They don't quit in that last mile. Why is that? You're almost there. Because you can see it, you keep on moving towards it. Most people quit in the 20th mile. That is where we're physically tired and then mentally drained. And so we have to keep our vision alive, and it will keep us alive. Keep your vision of what you're here building, what you're creating as a team. One team, one plan, one mission, one goal, one power, Jesus. And if we do that and we remember that vision that we're here together to fulfill, that we're filling God's vision, right? And we're filling that, we will continue to move forward with that power. And so positive leaders lead with that vision. Now, they also build great cultures, right? You cannot be successful if you do not have a great culture. And here's the thing about culture. Culture is not just one thing. Culture is everything. It's not just one person. It's everyone. Everyone here creates the culture of Teen Challenge. It's not just leadership, top leadership. It's everyone creates the culture of it. And we're creating it by what we think, by what we say, and by what we do. And the most powerful thing you can do to create a great culture is to know what we stand for. What do we stand for here? We stand for Jesus. Once you know what you stand for, every decision you make is easy. But it's about knowing what you stand for. We live in a world that is focusing on the fruit of the tree. They focus on the numbers. They focus on the stock prices. If you're in sports, they focus on wins and losses. But if we focus on the fruit and we ignore the root, what happens to the tree? It dies. But if we invest in that root and we make it our number one priority, we get a great supply of fruit. That root is Jesus. There is no recovery without him. There is no change without him. He is the power. In that root, we then see fruit. We have to remember that. It always is about going back to the core and the purpose and what we stand for and what gives us power. We do have to innovate. It's important to innovate, but always know when you innovate, you must innovate from your culture, from your power and your tradition of the past, because it's that power from the past that helps you create your future. Are you with me on that? It's that power that helps you create the future. So many people try to innovate, but they forget the past. But a lot of times people just focus on the past and they don't innovate and they don't change. It's the combination of the two that allows us to be successful. So we focus on that culture. I work with a lot of football teams, and so a number of years ago, Matt Ryan was a rookie quarterback and Mike Smith was a rookie coach. And I spoke to the Atlanta Falcons, and the year before they were 4-12 and they went to 11-5. And then a few years ago, Sean McVay called, and I started working with the Rams, and they were 4-12 the year before he took over, and we started working together, and they went to 11-5. So am I the reason for their success? Of course not. I spoke to the Cleveland Browns a few years ago. What I know is it's never the talk, it's never a book, it's always the leadership. It's always the culture, it's the people, it's the teamwork, and it's how we come together to focus on our core Jesus, to focus on what matters most, and that allows us to drive forward towards that vision that we want to create. Now, as positive leaders, we also have to make sure we're leading with optimism and positivity and belief. And as Christians, as people of faith, we should truly understand that. I find sometimes I go to people or organizations that are of faith, and yet they seem to be the least optimistic people. And yet we should be the most. Duke University did a study. Duke studied optimists, and they found that they worked harder, got paid more, and they were more likely to succeed in business and sports. And what they found was that these optimists, because they believed in a brighter and better future, they then took the actions necessary to create it. It's weird because, and I actually think a little funny, the researchers use the term deluded. It says that they deluded themselves into believing that something was possible. We might use the term faith instead of deluded. We might say that all things are possible with God. We might use the term belief. We might use the term, Jesus said, even greater things than I shall you do. Jesus was the ultimate encourager. There is optimism, there is belief, knowing that there is a better and brighter future, that God has a greater plan for us. And trusting in that plan and believing in that plan, the research now shows that we will then take the actions necessary to create it. Are you with me on this? So our belief matters, our optimism matters. As leaders, as people, do we believe that the best is yet to come? And so often, when we have a belief, when we're in a struggle, when we have people that are going through a really difficult situation in their life, people don't see that optimism. They don't see that belief. They don't see what's possible. They see where you are, but God sees where you're going. They see your challenge, but God sees your greater opportunity. You might see your problem, but God sees your purpose. And it's all about those challenges that we must face to become ultimately who we're meant to be. It's that optimism, it's that belief, it's that understanding that something great is coming our way. And we have to remember that no matter what we're going through, that we can overcome it. And your optimism ultimately creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, your belief and your faith. I believe God wants us to take action, and as we take action, we then become someone who could then receive his power by doing so. It's not going to happen if we just sit down. It's not going to happen if we don't do anything, right? God is using us and working through us to make things happen, and that's what you all do. You create miracles every day, and you are the hands and feet of God doing his work, helping people, making an impact, making a difference. But we have to remember, he's the power source. He's working through us to ultimately have that greater impact. So what do you believe about the future? Do you believe the best is yet to come? Do you? Do you believe that all things are possible with God? If we believe that, we will then create that. It's so funny because people often call us delusional when we have that belief. And I remember telling my dad, I want to be a writer and speaker, Dad. I found my calling. My dad was not a believer. So his response was, what the heck you want to do that for? That's a load of junk. That won't amount to anything. He used other words. A couple years after his encouraging advice, I got on the Today Show. So I remember flying up to New York to be on national television. I was terrified. I got to the green room. They sat me next to Queen Latifah. She was awesome. We had a great time, great conversation. It came my time to go be with Ann Curry. And I'm walking towards the door, and Queen yelled, "You go, energy guy." I didn't know what to call her, Miss Latifah, Queen. So I said, "Thank you, Queen." And I went out there, I coached several people on enhancing their energy and their optimism for their work. And as I walked out of the studio, who called me on the phone but my dad? He's like, "Your mother, I just saw you on TV. You really made a difference. We're so proud of you. We always knew you could do it." Not everyone's going to see what you see. Not everyone will share your optimism and your belief. But what I've learned is that your positivity, your faith, your belief must be greater than all the negativity and doubt. Your certainty must be greater than all the fear and all the skepticism and the pessimism that is out there. Pessimists do not change the world. Naysayers say you can't do it. Complainers complain about problems, but they don't solve them. Critics write words, but they don't write the future. Throughout history, it's the positive leaders, the believers, the dreamers, and the doers that ultimately have the greatest impact, and that is you. Can I just give you a hand right now? That is you. Come on, let's go. Celebrate yourselves. Celebrate yourselves. Celebrate the difference you make. Celebrate the impact that you have. Now, here's the thing. Maybe you're not naturally positive. Maybe you're like me. Maybe it's hard to get excited. Maybe it's hard to be optimistic and positive all the time. I'm naturally like that. But here's what I know. We have to feed ourselves so that way we can feed others. Because if we don't have it, we can't share it. We have to feed ourselves. There's a great story about a man who goes to the village to speak to the wise man. And he says to the wise man, "I feel like there are two dogs inside me. I have this one positive, optimistic, and energetic dog, and I have this mean-spirited, pessimistic, and negative dog, and they fight all the time. I don't know who's going to win." And the wise man thinks for a moment and says, "I know who's going to win, the one you feed the most." So feed the positive dog. And every day we have the choice to feed the positive or the negative inside of us. And whichever one we feed, that's what grows. And the best advice they ever heard is from Dr. James Gills. He's the only person on the planet to complete 6 double Ironman triathlons. Double Ironman, which means you do an Ironman, and then the next day you do another one. And the last time he did it, he was 59 years old. Jerry, we're doing one tomorrow, right? 59 years old. I can't even swim the length of a pool. So he was asked how he did it. He said this. I really want you to listen to this because this is really so critical for our lives. He said, "I've learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself. I've learned to talk to myself instead of listen to myself." He said, if I listen to myself, I hear all the negative, all the fear, all the doubt, and all the complaints and all the reasons why I can't do it. But if I talk to myself, I can feed myself with the words and the encouragement that I need to keep on moving forward. Be honest, how many of us need to talk to ourselves instead of listen to ourselves? What he would do is memorize and recite scripture. And so he would recite and memorize those words of encouragement from God that would fuel him and energize him and keep him going. We have to talk to ourselves with those words of encouragement instead of listening to the negative thoughts and all of those lies that are coming in. The enemy is known as the father of lies. We have to remember that. And those thoughts that are coming to you, Those negative thoughts that are filling your mind and brain, you need to understand those thoughts are not coming from you. How do I know? You would never choose to have a negative thought, would you? Who would ever choose a negative thought? The thoughts are always coming in. It's a spiritual battle. But here's the key. Don't believe the lies. Don't believe the lies. Instead, speak truth to the lies and walk in that truth, walk in that power. And Jesus shows us this when he was being tempted by the enemy, by the devil in the wilderness. Every time the enemy would tempt, what did Jesus say? It is written. It is written. It is written. It is written. He gives us the blueprint on how to defeat the lies of the enemy. We just have to speak truth to those lies and then live that truth and walk in that truth and that power. And when we do, we win the battle of our mind. See, I was losing the battle of my mind. My wife wanted me to go on depression medication. She wanted me to do all these different things. I said, let me just give it a shot. Let me try this. And little I started to take these walks of gratitude. And every day I would just say what I'm thankful for, because I read that the research shows you can't be stressed and thankful at the same time. If you're feeling blessed, you won't be stressed. So I started taking these walks of gratitude. But those walks of gratitude started to turn into walks of prayer. And then on those walks of prayer, I started to fuel up with the words of God in my walk. And that just started to change me from the inside out, slowly but surely, over time. It wasn't an overnight thing, right? You weed and feed the negative and you feed the positive. You do it for a day, it's not going to do much. You do it for a week, okay, you start to see a little bit of an impact. Do it for a month, wow. Do it for a year, that garden starts to look really good. Do it for 7 years now. Do it for me, it's been about 13, 14 years now. That garden starts to look magnificent. You change your spirit. You change everything that is inside. And you nurture that garden. You invest in that root. And you start to see everything start to flourish around your life. There is hope in your future. There is hope in your future. You just have to do the gardening. You just have to do a little bit of the work of feeding that positive and nurturing it on a daily basis. And the more we do, we do it with that truth. We do it with that truth. That gives us the power to continue to move forward and see an impact in our lives. I want to share with you a story. I think it's a great analogy for life. And again, it's a funny story. It might not seem like it's relevant, but I believe it is. My family and I, we were traveling from Jacksonville, Florida, where we live, and we were going to Maine, first time ever going to Maine, connecting in the Philadelphia airport. We arrived an hour and a half late for our connecting flight. We landed in Terminal A, and we're leaving from Terminal F. I know in Philly you have to connect at C16, which is really far from A. You get to C16, you then have to take a bus shuttle, which then takes you to F. I look at the screen, we only have 10 minutes to make our connecting flight. I'm thinking there's no way we're going to make it, but we have to go for it. So I look at my wife and kids. My children were 8 and 10 at the time. I said, all right, guys, let's start running. So there we are now, start running through the airport. Those who travel recently, perhaps some of you travel here, have you noticed more people running through airports? Okay, next time you see someone run by you at an airport or even around town, I want to encourage you to do what I do, cheer them on. I cheer people on all the time. The other day, this woman was running by me in the Atlanta airport. And I said, go, 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 I believe in you. You can do it. She was really struggling as she ran by me. She ran by me like this. I mean, she gave me the thumbs up. I don't always get that response, though. I was in LaGuardia, New York, and I cheered this guy on, and you know he gave me the finger. But it's all right. No, I turned a negative into a positive. I said, that's right. You're number one. And so that was us as a family now. We're running through this airport. We're huffing and puffing. We're doing our best. And finally, we get to C16, and there are no bus shuttles there. Look at the watch. 5 minutes to make our connecting flight. There's a woman who's coordinating all the buses. I said, how long do the buses get here? She said 4 minutes. And so my children start crying. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. So I turned to my kids. I said, guys, you have to stay positive. You have to believe we're going to make it. I'm telling you, we're going to make it. I turned to the woman. I said, we're going to make it, right? She said, you ain't going to make it. Finally, the bus arrives. We get on the bus. We get to Terminal F. It's the last gate. So now we're sprinting down Terminal F as fast as we can. I have to admit, I left my wife and kids in the dust. I was getting on that plane with or without them. And just as I arrived, guess what happened? They slammed the door right in my face. I said, man, my wife and kids, they're in their way thinking that would help. She said, I'm sorry, sir, there's nothing I can do. I said, you don't understand, we have all these plans. All the flights are booked. We'll have to stay overnight in the airport. It will ruin everything. We have to get on this plane. She said, I'm sorry, sir, the plane is pushing back. Look, my wife and kids arrived in that moment. We walk to the big window. We see the small plane. It's pushing back. And as we're watching this plane push back, they're just so dejected, they're crying. But then we realize that we can see into the cockpit. We realize that we can see the pilots. We realize that they can see us. We make eye contact. So my wife and kids start jumping up and down, waving to the pilots. About a minute later, the door opens. A woman came out and she said, it worked. It was a great moment. She said, they're going to let you on the plane. We walked down the stairs on the tarmac. They stopped the plane. The passengers were not very positive. They're from New York. We take off. I'm just kidding. I could do that, right? We take off. We land. Another miracle occurred. Our luggage made it too. A true miracle in Philadelphia. I became a believer in God in that moment. And we're driving away in the rental car thinking, okay, this is a great teachable moment for my kids. I said, so what'd you learn from this experience? I think they're going to say, Dad, I want to stay positive. I learned to believe. My 8-year-old son said, Dad, I learned to just keep running. And when he said it, I thought, there's a lot of truth in that. I turned to my wife. I said, so often the key is that we just keep running. We just continue to move forward. We never give up, and we stay positive on this journey. We lead with that optimism. We lead with that belief. And we turn our challenges into opportunities. We turn our mess into our message, our test into our testimony. And we know that somehow, some way, we will create a brighter and better future. I have a new book coming out in about a week or two, July 2nd. The reason why I'm telling you this is because the guy I wrote it with is Damon West. And Damon West was a meth addict. And Damon was locked up in jail for 7 years. He was actually given 60 years. He was burglarizing homes all throughout the Dallas area. So he gets out after 7 years because of good behavior and a changed heart. Jesus changed him from the inside out in jail. He grew up in a very loving Christian home. His dad was a sports writer. He totally just, went in the wrong direction. And then he came out and he said, God, how can I be of use? And so he started to speak to football teams because he was a football player at North Texas. And I was speaking to Clemson University football team. I've worked with them for the past 8 years now. And I get up to Clemson and I see Dabo Swinney, the head coach, and he's become a good friend. I'm about to speak to the team. And he said, hey, I got to tell you, John, we just had the most amazing talk ever by this guy, Damon West, about the coffee bean. And I said, Dabo, I speak to the team every year. That was the most amazing talk ever. And just a joke. It's just, I didn't really say that, but it was funny when he said it to me. And so, but he told me about the coffee bean message and about this guy's story. And I was just so intrigued, and I Googled coffee bean, and there was a lot of videos on the idea of the carrot, the egg, and the coffee bean. And the carrot, when you put it into hot water, what happens to it? It gets soft. A lot of people don't know that, so I'm glad someone said. It gets soft. It gets weakened by its environment. When you put an egg into hot water, boiling hot water, what happens to the egg? It's hard. It gets hardened. We can sometimes be like the carrot where we get softened and weakened by our environment. We can be like the egg at times where we get hardened and bitter and angry by the environment we're in our circumstances and situation. But when you put a coffee bean into boiling hot water, within an hour, that coffee bean makes coffee. It transforms the water. It's not impacted by its environment. Instead, it impacts the environment it's in. And positive leadership is always about leading from the inside out. The power is inside you. And so I knew that I needed to tell that story and share the story. And so I could have done it by myself and made a lot more money. But God said, you need to do it with Damon West. And so I reached out to him and we talked, and at first he's like, why are you calling me? I'm like, well, Dabo told me about your story and your message of the coffee bean, and I really think that needs to be a book, so let's do it together. And so we decided to do this book together. And the important thing is that his life is completely transformed. God is using him in such an amazing way. We had the Power of Positive Summit, which is a free online summit we do every year with videos from encouraging people. And, Inky Johnson, if you heard of Inky, and other people like that. And Erwin McManus did, and a bunch of others, Craig Rochelle, and different pastors do it. Mark Batterson did it a few years ago. And we have this summit every year, and it's free. We have about 40 to 50,000 people sign up. And Damon told his story this year via the summit, and it was by far the most popular talk of all. And I tell you that because he knows that God is using him in a major way right now, and he's turning the negative into a positive. He's turning the challenge into an opportunity. He's turning what happened in the past into a brighter and better future for him and all those that he impacts. And I know maybe some of you, right where you are right now, you may not be able to see that far ahead where you are. But I want to encourage you to keep planting those seeds of trust and belief and faith, and know that a harvest is coming. Keep planting those seeds, knowing a harvest is coming. That's positive leadership. We continue to do the work from the inside out, trusting that a harvest is coming. We nurture that root, knowing that there will be fruit coming. And that's how we have to lead. But we can't do it alone. Positive leaders lead through relationships. They lead by building great teams. And that's where you win in the locker room comes first. It's where we put these C's. In the win in the locker room, I talked about 7 C's to building a winning team. And I want to share with you a few C's here that will allow us to build these great relationships and great teams, because they are everything. And that first C is so essential. It's communication. Communication is how you begin the process of building a great team, a great relationship. And here's the thing that I know. Where there's a void in communication, negativity will fill it. So we have to make sure that we're consistently filling the void with positive communication. If we don't communicate well, bad things happen, am I right? Yeah, I was running late to a speaking engagement one time, and I go to grab my bag out of the kitchen, and I look out the back patio. There's a snake on the patio. I do not have time to deal with this snake because I am running really late. So I grabbed my bag, and I ran out the door. As I ran out the door, I noticed that my wife's cell phone was on the counter. Catherine, my wife, was running errands. I'm thinking, I got to let Catherine know about the snake. So now I'm driving really fast to the airport. I finally come to a red light, and I pull out the phone, and I start texting her. Catherine, there's a snake on the patio. Green light. I take off. I sprint through security. I sprint on the plane. I just made it. I pull out the phone. Catherine, did you get my text? She's like, yeah, John, I get your text. You type snack instead of snake. Yeah. And there was not a snack on the patio. The snake was there, and I'm still paying for it to this day. My wife got me a book shortly after that, and she said we should read it together. And I look at the cover. It's called Have a New Husband by Friday. And it's all about slowing down so that we can communicate better, to build that trust that generates the commitment, that fosters the teamwork, and delivers the results. We have to make sure we are communicating as one body, one team, to develop those strong relationships that ultimately create a strong organization. It all starts with that communication. That leads us to the next C, which is to connect. We have to make sure that we're connecting. We're not just communicating, but we're communicating to connect at a deeper level. Connection is where we earn that bond of trust. And here's why connection is so important. You will never have commitment without connection. It is the connection that breeds the commitment. And a connected team becomes a committed team. And a committed team becomes a powerful team. So it all starts with that great connection. I think about Jesus and how Jesus shows us the model of that, developing the relationships at a deep level. He took his 12. He was able to invest in his 12. 3 in a really intimate way. 12, I don't really believe we can connect more necessarily than 12, any one person. And so we have to develop those connections and take time for that. Think about the power of that. If you were a betting man 2,000 years ago, John Ortberg asked this question, who would you have bet on? A small Jewish rabbi with 12 incompetent followers, or the Roman Empire? And yet, 2,000 years later, we name our kids Peter, Paul, and Mary, and our dogs Nero and Caesar. Jesus turned the world upside down through the power of relationships. The power of relationships, the power of connection. And we could take that connection every day to develop that commitment. with each other and have a huge impact on a team. I can walk into any team. I work with a lot of pro sports teams. By the way, I knew the Raptors were going to beat the 76ers because they were more connected. They were more connected. I knew ultimately, somehow, some way, yes, it took a lucky bounce, but I knew somehow, some way that they would find a way to win because they were more connected and more committed. But I can tell who is connected or not, and the minute I can tell who's connected, I will know who's committed and who's going to have greater results. So as one team, as a body, we have to be connected, communicate, and then connect. And then that leads us to the third C, which is commit. Commitment is where we put we before me. It's where we serve others through service and sacrifice. It's where we go first as leaders, as great team members. Always remember, leaders go first. We have to make sure that we're taking the time to develop those relationships through our commitment, letting people know that we are committed to them. And that's what ultimately led me to following Jesus, because I saw his commitment to me. You see, my biological father left when I was a year old. And so he was never connected or committed to me and my brother. My mom remarried my dad, the New York City cop, when I was 5 years old, and he was very committed. I understood the love and commitment of another human being through him and my mother. They were truly committed. I sometimes thank God every day that I was not raised by my biological father, even though it was painful, even though it caused me a lot of pain, even though it was a feeling of abandonment most of my life until I went up to see him and I actually forgave him. But it was that lack of commitment, and then also understand the love of my dad who took me on as his own. And he said, I'll never forget, in the garage, he said, your mother and I are getting married. I want you to call me dad, and I'll love you like my own. And he did. And I feel like, and I know, that led my path, that led the way to me following Jesus, because I saw that he had even a greater love for me and took me on as his own and saved me from the inside out. And we go through our journey, and a lot of times we make Jesus our Savior, but we also have to do something even more than that. My daughter's been going and working with a Christian counselor and having some great work with him. A really, really, really Bible-focused, spiritual man who is all about the Holy Spirit and all about focusing on Jesus. When you have a session with him, you see Jesus, a painting of Jesus in the background. And I joined them in a session. I said, Jade, I want to talk to this guy with you. I want to be a part of this with you and him and just see what you're talking about. Plus, I have some things I want to discuss that I have some issues with. Some things my daughter was doing. And so we had this session, and we're Skyping, but I can see him, he can see me. It's pretty intimate. And I was going through some of the things that I'm concerned about. He said, hold on, John, hold on. He said, so you were baptized in 2006, right? And that's when you made Jesus your Savior, right? I said, yeah. He said, when did you make him the Lord of your life? Boom. The minute he said that, the New Yorker in me wanted to hit him. I mean, honestly, I was like, at first I was like, come on. But as soon as he hit me with that, I knew he was right. And God was speaking to me so powerfully in that moment. Yes, I made him my Savior, but I needed to make Jesus the Lord of my life. And in doing that, allowing that greater commitment to flow through me, it made me more committed to my daughter and everything else. So she forgave me in that moment. I forgave her, and our relationship bonded like no other after that. It's amazing what happens when we commit to God, we understand his commitment to us, and then we take that commitment and we then share it with others. My mom passed away 13 years ago. I remember visiting her in South Florida, and we were taking this walk together. She loved to walk. She was 5'2", Energizer Bunny. And as we're walking, I said, Mom, let's turn back. She said, no, I want to go to the store. I want to get you some stuff to make you a sandwich for your drive home. My mom was a Jewish mom. She thought I would starve if I didn't have food for a 5-hour drive home. So we got the stuff, and we made our way back. And as we made our way back, I could tell she was really tired. We got into her kitchen, and the first thing she did was make me that sandwich. I didn't think much about that sandwich at the time. I didn't think much about the sandwich as I drove home those 5 hours. It was a great sandwich, but I didn't think much about it. But I think about that sandwich all the time because that was the last time I saw my mom alive. She was battling cancer. And yet I often think about what was her biggest priority? Making me a sandwich. We think it's about the big things. Commitment is so often about doing the little things with a big dose of love. Are you with me on that? And to be a great team member, we have to show our commitment to our team in all sorts of small ways. But it's those small ways that show our love, that show our selflessness, that allow us to truly help others grow and to build a great team. You see, when we commit to others, what I've learned is that when we demonstrate commitment to others, not only do they improve, but we improve. Not only do they get better, but we get better. It's just how it works. Our commitment to others helps others improve, and we improve. And that commitment changes everything. So we're talking about communicating. We're talking about connecting. We're talking about committing. And then the last C that I want to share is care. You will only build greatness through a greater level of care. I wrote a book called The Carpenter, and it's about the fact that you can show up and build something, right? You can show up and build something and just go through the motions. But a craftsman who God calls us to be, and craftswomen, he calls us to create a work of art. He calls us to create a masterpiece. He calls us to build greatness. And I want you to know that there is greatness inside every single person in this room. That there is greatness inside everyone here. And God calls you to build that greatness. Do you want to be great? I know that everybody says that they want to be great. I've never had anybody say, yeah, I want to be average. I'm convinced we want to be great because God planted that in our heart and soul because we were made in the likeness and image of God. If we're made in the likeness and image of God, he calls us to do great things for him. Not for ourselves, not for our glory, but for his glory. But he calls us to go out and do great things. And what does that mean? I think that means bringing out the greatness in others, which you all do every day. We're here to bring out the greatness in others by going to do great things that he calls us to do. I love the quote by Martin Luther says that the Christian shoemaker doesn't honor God by putting crosses on shoes. He honors God by making great shoes. That God loves great craftsmanship. And so he loves when we're here to build that grace and greatness and to build that masterpiece. And we only do that by a greater level of care. And so I know you care. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care. But I'm going to challenge you to care more. Can we care more? I'm going to challenge you to put a little bit more time, a little bit more energy, a little bit more effort, a little bit more heart, a little bit more soul into what you're building to create what God wants us to create. I call it the 1% rule. Everybody raise your hands in the air, both hands in the air. Can you care more? Can you care more? Now raise them higher. Now go as high as you can go. All right, we all went a little bit higher. Now reach out and connect to the people around you. If you're a germphobe, just go like this. Now give yourselves a hand. That care is so important because there's 5 D's that will destroy a team. There are 5 D's that will destroy us individually. The enemy uses these 5 D's to bring us down. I want to share this because I just think I have to. I felt called as I was coming here that I have to share with you the 5 D's. I was taking a walk one day, and God gave me this revelation of the 5 D's. And this is the enemy's blueprint against us. And the first D is discourage. So the enemy tries to discourage us. He knows that he can't beat us himself. So what does he do? He gets us to beat ourselves. The second D is distort. The enemy takes what is true and what is pure and what is beautiful, and he distorts through lies. I was talking about the lies earlier, Those lies that are always coming in are from the enemy, and he's always distorting truth and trying to speak to you with those lies, and he wants you to believe those lies. Why? Because he knows if you will believe those lies, you will forget God's truth. He knows that if you will believe him, you won't believe God. He knows that if you don't trust in God, you're more likely to believe his lies. So the goal is to discourage and then distort. Are you with me on this? Discourage and distort. It all started in the garden. The original lie. When Adam and Eve ate the apple and they ate the fruit. He said, did God really say you couldn't eat from all the trees in the garden? No, actually, God said you just couldn't eat from that one tree. He was already planting seeds of doubt. He was already planting lies. And then he said, if you eat this fruit, you will be like God. See, everyone thinks that they ate the fruit because of pride. No, they already were like God. They already were like God. They were made in the likeness and image. The enemy made them believe they weren't. And every day we are listening to the distorted lies. We are believing in the lies instead of trusting what God says about us. Here's the thing. Even though you may not doing great things right now, God has a great plan for you. You may not be feeling great, but it doesn't mean that you can't be great tomorrow. I tell this to athletes all the time. You might not be playing great right now, but you have greatness inside of you every day. And that is not something that's airy-fairy. It's not something that's motivational. That is truth. God says you are loved. He says that you are his. He says that I will always be with you. He caused you and built you and created you for a greater purpose to do great things. Remember that. Do not believe those lies. Third D, distract. The fruit was appealing. So often God will cause distractions to get us from focusing on what matters most. There's the saying that says that if the devil won't make you bad, he'll make you busy. He'll get you focused on all the things that don't matter instead of what does. Or he'll distract you to make you bad. Here in Florida, we have sea turtles. Sea turtles come on shore around now till August, and they basically plant or they bury their eggs in the sand. A few months later, they hatch. And when they hatch, those sea turtles are designed by God to follow the pure light of the moon towards the ocean. In most oceans and most beaches, the pure light of the moon is the brightest light, so they go towards that. But now with all these developments, with big condos and restaurants and buildings along the shore, a lot of times now the brightest lights are there. And so the sea turtles actually go in the wrong direction as a result of that. They follow the bright, shiny lights that seem appealing towards a disastrous future and a bad outcome. And I think so often that's what the enemy does to us. He distracts us with these shiny things that don't matter, these bright lights, these drugs and so forth that say, we'll take it all away. Just focus on this. Focus on this instead of God's love. Focus on this, what's wrong, instead of doing this, what's right. He makes it appealing, makes it shiny, and then it leads us to a bad decision, a bad outcome. And so instead of focusing on the pure light of the moon, our greater purpose, we go in the wrong direction. But the great news is that Jesus is that bright light for us. He is that pure light of the moon. He is our greater purpose. And so if you just focus on what matters most and you focus on that, distraction cannot get in the way of what you're here to do. I will never allow a distraction to get in the way of my purpose. I did in the past, but I will not now. And yes, every day it's a choice. Every day it's a decision. Every day it's not easy. But if we focus on Jesus, we focus on our North Star, we focus on the pure light of the moon, it takes us where we're supposed to go. So just understand that enemy, that distraction he tries to use, has no power when you focus on what matters most. Fourth D, doubt. The enemy tries to fill us with doubt that God can't be trusted, and God's central question of us is, will you trust me? And everything changed in my life when I gave my life to God, and I said, I trust in your plan, and everything in your life will change when you fully trust God. I know many of you have already done that, but there are some that haven't yet. I want to encourage you to trust in the creator of the universe, the one who created you, the one who has a plan for you. Trust in God's plan. Trust in him. There's a saying going around in sports, say, trust the process. Trust the process. No, I say, trust in the one who created the process. Trust in that. Trust in God. And the doubt will have no power. And then finally, the last D is divide. So he uses discouragement, distortion, distraction, and doubt to what? To divide us. To ultimately divide us from God. And what does that lead to? The 6D. In a team, it leads to defeat. An individual, it leads to destruction. A marriage, it leads to divorce. The enemy uses these 5Ds to accomplish that 6D. What is the number of the enemy? It is the number 6. God gave me this on a walk one day. But thankfully, we know in Jesus, there is a positive outcome. This is the power of positive leadership. In Jesus, we know we win the battle. We know that when we unite and we come together as one, what happened in the garden gets reconciled by the cross. The separation of separation of man, and the reconciliation to God, right, are part of the same story. And so we're living that story out. We've been separated, we've been divided, and now we can come back through Jesus to oneness, to one with the Father. And in that, that's when we are healed. That's when we are one. That's when we unite. And we need to do that with our body as well. We need to do that with Teen Challenge as an organization. We need to come together as one to unite. We need to encourage when there is discouragement. We don't give up because it's hard. We give up because we get discouraged. So we need to encourage. When we get distracted, we have to continually get back to what matters most, and we're going to focus on loving others. It's that simple. On Jesus, we focus on that. We focus on relationships. It's that simple. We can talk about all the million factors that divide us, or we can focus on the one thing that unites us. We will focus on what matters most. And then when that doubt comes in, we will trust. And in that, we win the battle. And that then leads us to the 7th D. The 7th D is the number of completion, is the number 7. That leads us to our destiny, the plan that God has for us. And when we teach this to others, that's the 8th D, that's discipleship. And in that, we help others understand that this is how the spiritual battle is being played out. Every day it's a spiritual battle, that the battle between good and evil. And in that battle, when we understand how the game is being played, now we can win that battle because we can see it. And you'll start to see where discouragement sets in. You'll start to see where the distortions are coming in. You'll start to see where the doubt is being planted. You'll start to see that. You'll start to see the distractions when they come at you. You'll start to see the divisions that are happening. And the minute you see it, you can start to rectify it. You can start to work through it with Jesus, of course, and through his power. And then from there, you can create a great outcome. Any questions before we close? Feel free to ask me anything. I hope you write those D's down because it really will help you with anything. The 6th D, for a marriage, it's divorce. For an individual, it's destruction. For a team, it's defeat. And I've shared this with some coaches, these D's. And it's cool because some of these coaches aren't believers, but I share it with them. And then once they see that it's a spiritual battle, I explain to them that you can't win a spiritual battle with man-made strategies. You have to understand how it's being played. And once you do, then that will lead you to God. And a lot of these people are being led by understanding and seeing it in plain sight, what's really going on and what's happening. And it's happening inside every one of us. And the only way we win is through Jesus. It's the only way that we win. I was tearing up as we were worshiping. Worship band was amazing, and I was just tearing up because I I could see my life and my journey, how it led me to this moment. And I can see all the mistakes I made. And I see all the things I need to be forgiven for. I could see all the things that I wish I would have done differently. And then I said, you know what? But I'm brought here right now in this moment to be with you to share this. And I can see that God's plan is working perfectly. We're imperfect beings, but there's a perfect plan working through us. Any questions? Feel free to ask me anything. Anything on Teen Challenge, anything on challenges, negativity. We really didn't get much into energy vampires. We didn't really talk a lot about that. Gandhi said, I will not let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. I wish there was a scripture that Jesus said that. But I got to share Gandhi instead, but you know. Their life's purpose. I would tell them, and I wrote it, the reason why I'm not trying to sell books, I just wrote this book called The Seed, and it's about finding your purpose. And I would tell them that you can't know your purpose without a relationship with the one who created you for a purpose. And that everyone is searching for their purpose. It's why the purpose-driven life has sold 100 million copies. And because everyone wants to know why they're here. And why they're here is God's purpose for them. And so I think it's about walking with God, being reconciled to him through Jesus. And then as you are, God starts to reveal his greater purpose to you. But I would also say you have to then start doing small acts of purpose and start living with more purpose and working on purpose. And when you start doing these things with more purpose, you open yourself up to the bigger purpose that God has for you that starts to move through you. But you have to start by actually living a little bit more on purpose. And again, we have jobs. I believe you leave jobs. You leave jobs. You don't leave your calling, though. So your job is just a job. But the calling is the calling that God has for you. And he can use many jobs to fulfill that calling. So it's about knowing, God, what is it you want me to do and why am I here? Yeah. And then knowing it's a journey. Ups and downs, twists and turns. And it's a path that we must all go on. I never thought that I would be someone who believed in Jesus. You know, in my household, we never went to church, never went to temple. My mom would say Jesus was a great teacher. He was a prophet. You know, he thought he was the Messiah, but we're still waiting for the Messiah. I believe the Messiah came. And he's going to come again. When my mom passed away, one of our last conversations was, she said, who am I to say Jesus wasn't who he says he was? Maybe you're right. Because I tried to tell her about Jesus. And that was one of our last conversations that we had, was that. Pretty cool. My dad, not so much. Any other questions? Nothing? Nothing else? Oh. Yeah, so, well, Tom Brady. You got to have a great quarterback. No, but great team. A great team. Bill Belichick does a great job of teaching and coaching and leading with his team. A lot of people don't think Bill Belichick is a great leader because they see the guy on TV. But he just does that because he doesn't want to talk to the media and doesn't want them to twist things around because he knows that they are distorting truth. And from the outside, he's not going to allow the enemy, right, to destroy his team and defeat his team. So he keeps his team focused. You can actually see the D's play out united, and he keeps the lies away and tries to just not give them anything. So I think he does a really great job of that. And so he knows how to build a great team. Yeah. A lot of credit to him on that. And I'm not a Patriots fan, but someone who studies and works with teams, that's what he's doing. And I watched a Football Life with him the other day on the NFL Network, and I was watching him and all the behind-the-scenes stuff, and I'm like, wow, he's very animated. He's a great teacher. Well, he's investing in his players. Wow, a lot of those guys love him. And when people go to the Patriots, they know what the culture's all about. And the culture's all about, you're going to come here and do your job or else you're gone. And they know that. So the key to any great team, by the way, love and accountability. You got to have both. You got to have love and accountability. You got to be demanding but not demeaning. You got to be loving but not enabling. You got to shout praise, whisper criticism. Small ego, big mission. These are a lot of the keys to really being a great team and a great leader. And that's the thing. Small ego, big mission. Great questions. One more question. So would a three steps? For me, again, I would only say what's right for me, but I think every human being is different. So I can only say what I would believe to be true. And thank you for asking that. One, I would say prayer. So first and foremost, it's about praying to God and most importantly, surrendering to God. So that's surrender. Number two, I would say it's reading the Word. I remember new Christian. My daughter was at a lacrosse camp. We're together, and I wrote the book The Carpenter, and I would read all these devotionals. I would listen to thousands of sermons. And my daughter and I are driving from Lake Placid, New York to Albany. And as we're driving, I said to my daughter, Jade, I can't believe you haven't read my book, The Carpenter. People are going to ask you about the book and about your dad's book, and you didn't read it. And God said to me, I'm telling you, he goes, you haven't read my book? Just like that. Just like that, because I had never read the whole Bible. You haven't read my book? And I was like, what? Like this. It was wild. And I'm driving, and I turned to my daughter, I said, Jade, guess what? You don't have to read my book. God says I don't have to read it until I read his. And so I started with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And as I read the Gospels first time, even though I read all these devotionals, even though I listened to all these sermons, I gave my life to Jesus, because I was convicted by the Holy Spirit first. That's what changed everything for me initially. But as I started to read the Word, there was so much power in that. So I would say that would be step two. So to me, it's surrender. And I could be wrong. This is just for me. There's much more qualified people to talk about this than me. Read the Word, and then the third thing in renewing the mind is, I would say every day have a practice where you're feeding yourself with gratitude and prayer. For me, it's that thank you walk that I did every day. And I just know that that's the most important thing I've done in my life to every single day, just about of that pouring in and receiving and surrendering in the course of that. So to me, it's those three things. So I hope that helps. All right, well, let's close then. I want to close with one final thought about being a great team. As I said earlier, we can't do it alone. We're better together. And then together we accomplish amazing things. Every year when my daughter was young, we would go up to the FCA lacrosse camp. Well, this was actually after I became a Christian, so she was sort of about 10, 11 years old when we first started. But we're now going up to this camp, and they would ask me to speak to the coaches at FCA camp in the morning, and my good friend Dan Britton was speaking at night. And so I show up to camp, and Dan is there, and Dan's in charge of international ministry, and Dan said, John, good to see you. He's like, hey, you want to run with me tomorrow? Dan, at the time, was 6 years old. He was a marathon runner. He runs a 6-minute mile for the entire marathon. I said, no, Dan, I do not want to run a marathon with you. He said, just 5 miles. I'm like, no, I'm not running 5 miles. I haven't run 5 miles since college. So they went and ran the next day. Well, that night, Dan spoke to the campers, and it was so inspiring. I saw people giving their lives to Jesus, and I was just so encouraged. So I went up to Dan and said, Dan, I am running with you tomorrow. And so the next morning we got up, 6 a.m. We're running through the battlefields of Gettysburg. It was a beautiful day. I was so energized that first mile. But by the third mile, I was regretting my decision. By the 4th mile, it must have gotten really bad because they started to pray for me. They said that I turned pale white. So they were literally praying for me. John, we got this, John. God's got you, John. You could do this, John. Let's just make it to that lamppost over there, John. Let's just make it to that sign over there. Come on, John. You got this. The 5th mile, mostly uphill. We wrote a book together called One Word That Will Change Your Life. And so they were shouting out all sorts of words. John, one word grit, John. One word determination, John. One word faith. You can do this. I said, one word die. I do not want to finish this. I just want to give up right now. But they kept pushing me, and I made it to the 5th mile. The next morning, I got up. I couldn't even walk. My legs were filled with lactic acid. They felt like they were just 300 pounds each. And as I'm walking, it occurred to me that if I was by myself, I would have given up in the 3rd mile. But because I had my team with me, I call them my stretch team, because they were stretching me and growing me and pushing me and challenging me, praying for me and encouraging me, my team with me, I was able to finish this race. And so I know without a doubt, and you know without a doubt, that we are better together, and then together we can accomplish amazing things. No one creates success alone. We all need a team to be successful. I hope some of the things I shared today will make you a stronger team. I hope you see the battle that's in front of you and how the enemy uses those D's to try to bring you down. But as a team, we've come together, and through our unity, through our love, our passion, our purpose, our optimism, our belief, and our vision and our culture, we will win the battle together. I believe the best is yet to come as a team and for each person. I know that greatness is inside of you, and I know that God's going to bring it out. God bless you.
Awesome. Give it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ugh.